name is Kaylee Gonzalez. I am actually an applications engineer or expert with MLC CAD systems. And what I wanted to talk about today was SolidWorks Composer. I knew I was the third presenter and that there was going to be a lot of talk about SolidWorks. So I thought it would be maybe kind of a nice change to talk about something a little bit different. So let me go ahead and just kind of officially introduce myself here. See if I can, there we go. I've actually presented at these user groups and realized I never really talked about myself as a SolidWorks user. So I know I sound like I'm 12, I'm not. I've actually been with MLC CAD systems for almost 10 years. My 10th year anniversary is going to be coming up here in September. So I've been using SolidWorks that entire time, and then a little bit in college, I actually learned how to model in CATIA, and then kind of ended up diverging into the field of metrology for a little bit, doing very, very high-end inspection. I used a lot of 3D CAD-based 2D, did a lot of nanotechnology things. I don't even want to tell you how much stuff we lost because you couldn't even see it with the human eye. So that place is just packed with lost stuff. Going back a little bit further, again, I mentioned I went to college. This is why I learned in CATIA, because I had my aerospace degree. And this is where you kind of start sounding like you're on a bad dating app. But for hobbies and what I like doing for fun is I've actually been involved in music for a long time, still do it, still play multiple instruments. And then I have a couple of crazy friends who got me really involved in like hiking and trail running and things like that. So that's what I like to do now that it's cool out, you know, when it's not storming horrifically like it did the other day. So that's just a little bit about kind of my background as far as how long I've been with MLC and some of my education. What I really wanted to talk about today was kind of a different portion of SolidWorks. So when we think of SolidWorks, I think everyone here is a SolidWorks CAD user, and CAD is great. We all love CAD, and there's so much information out there. But if you look at number 3, this is kind of like a little gray area that is not often discussed nearly as much. SolidWorks as a company has an entire section dedicated to technical communication. And this is a section that I deal with quite frequently. So I do a lot with SolidWorks inspection, MBD. A lot of this is to create documents and doing documentation. And so is SolidWorks Composer, which is what I'm going to be just doing an overview with you guys today. So if you've never heard of SolidWorks Composer, let's talk a little bit about what this product does. So it kind of takes a moment to kind of wrap your head around what we're going to do. But instead of creating models, editing models, we're actually just going to leverage 3D models in order to create graphical content that we can easily output and customize for things like technical documentation. So if you find yourself using the snipping tool, using your little print screen button and cropping a bunch of photos from your SolidWorks files for assembly instructions, repair instructions, product manuals, training guides, tons of stuff, then this could actually be something that may be very, very useful. Again, we're not creating any type of CAD files, we're simply leveraging it. And we're going to see a lot of automation towards the second half as well. One thing that I love about SolidWorks Composer is the animations inside of it is extremely simple to do. I think it's actually, it blows SolidWorks out of the water as far as its simplicity in doing animations. And I'll show you just kind of in under 60 seconds how to get an animation started. And you can actually create interactive content for things to go on websites, creating catalogs of products. And I'll show you an example of that as well. So I'm going to go through an example using this bench grinder CAD file that we have. And I'm going to kind of show you kind of the main sections that we're going to do. And what we're going to start with is creating these views in SolidWorks Composer. Views are like your fundamental building blocks in Composer. Pretty much everything starts with a view. And once you have those done, you can start dragging things. And that's really how you can get to any other portion, whether it's animations or interactive content. We can add effects into those drawings. So as you can see here, or sorry, into those views rather, effects are things like arrows and lines and different types of ballooning. I mean, there's so much you can do inside of Composer to really enhance these images. Now, just to give you a heads up, those first 2 sections, the create views and the add effects, those take the longest. So if you're like, oh my gosh, it's taking forever, once I get to output content and design changes, it's going to start moving along really quickly. So just letting you know that, because sometimes it feels like it's kind of slow moving at the beginning, but then we're going to go through this whole scenario. So let's go into Composer, and we're going to talk a little bit about our project. We're going to create some of these base views here. So when I go into Composer, Composer is actually a standalone product. It's not inside of SolidWorks, it's its own product. But what I have open here is just a SolidWorks file. And I have a couple of views that I already created just to give us a good starting point. Now, to show you how many different file types we can actually open inside a Composer, I'll go ahead and show you the list here. So not only can you open native SolidWorks parts and assemblies if you have SolidWorks installed, there's also Pro E is in here, Inventor is in here, Step, IGES, Parasolid files. I like to use SolidWorks Composer specific files, .smg. SolidWorks can export those at any time, any version of SolidWorks. Just file save as .smg. It actually makes your performance in Composer extremely quick by comparison. So that's something that SolidWorks already has the ability to export to this file type. So that's really just what I brought in here. Now, as far as the views, I have my original view, and then I have this camera view. I'm going to create 6 additional views with you. And to do that, I'm going to kind of show you that I have this Microsoft Word document. It's like a skeleton document. There's not a lot in here. Maybe I'm starting this from the beginning, and this is going to be my operator's guide. So I have a couple of placeholders in here, just placeholder pictures. And I'm going to do a cover photo. I'm going to talk about grinding wheel replacement. There's going to be 2 photos or 2 graphics in there. We'll talk about how Composer handles unique parts lists. And then I'm going to do a motor detail view and an operated caution. So we're going to go ahead and get some of those basic views created. And those are the 6 views we're going to start with. One thing that I really like about using SolidWorks Composer is once we already have the file inserted, we're already leveraging CAD. And we're inside of this really easy 3D environment, which as SolidWorks users, we're already very accustomed to that. So one thing that I'm going to do is let's go ahead and just create a new view. That's going to be view 1. And in my mind, I know I'm going to plan ahead for this to be that cover photo. So Composer is not what we consider a photorealistic rendering tool, but it does have a ton of options available to us as far as customizing appearances to make them look a little bit more realistic. Again, if you're looking for photorealistic rendering, that's going to be something like SolidWorks Visualize or something like Keyshot. But we can add different colors into this. You can even add different types of what we call environmental effects. So again, my cover photo here is just going to have a little bit more of a realistic appearance. So I'm just adding some of these appearances in. As you can see, I can still click on all of these different items. Now, one thing that I want to stress here is I'm only working with graphical content. I'm not actually working with the entire CAD model as far as what's loaded in the background. So what that means is even if you have very large, massive assemblies, the performance is going to be very good in Composer. And that is partially due to the fact that we're only working in graphical content. So again, I'm just working on making this a little bit more realistic looking, adding a couple different settings for lighting, ambient occlusion. You can even change the background if you want it to be slightly different. What's great about this is once I'm done, I can update that view and it saves it for me. More views you have, more you can leverage. So here I can go back to my original view. Notice that goes back to all of those initial settings. And here, let's go ahead and make this again a little bit brighter. Because we're leveraging CAD files, one thing that we actually have at our disposal is our entire assembly tree. So you can utilize the assembly tree as it is, but Composer also lets you take different items of the CAD file and put them into something called selection sets. And this allows us to actually start moving items around, even though we're working in this graphical content. What's also really nice to know is that everything we're doing right now does not go back into the CAD model. So what that means for us is that we have full ability here to explode, make changes, do really whatever we need to do in order to create some of these images and some of this content for our document. We don't have to worry about affecting on the model or the design or any design intent or anything like that. Everything is just going to be inside of this composer file. One other thing we'll go ahead and do here is I'll make one change to the settings. Maybe I want a couple of these items just to have a little bit different appearance. We can customize this as well so that I can show those particular edges. Now this is going to be the basis for my next two views, so I'll go ahead and save those. Now for my fourth view, that's what's going to be that guards parts list. Composer has a huge assortment of selection tools, such as showing the selection, hiding other things. SolidWorks has items similar to this as well, but again, Composer actually kind of takes that to the next level for things like this. And let's go ahead and make this silhouette. Again, we're just getting the basis for our views here. I'll go back to the original, and I will make sure that my lighting is a little bit brighter. That's the thing. I could save the original. Maybe I'll just do that there, and then save this as view 5 and view 6. So not too bad there. We're able to create views very, very quickly. We are in this familiar 3D environment, and we can still show how items come apart, go together, and we start reusing CAD data from the very beginning. Now, the next thing we would want to do is add special effects or specific effects into these images to add clarity, knowing we're going to export these to go into a document. So if I go back into view 2, you can double click on any of these views in order to navigate through the project. And I'm going to choose these pieces of hardware, and I'm going to go ahead and choose my author tab, and maybe we want to just add a couple of paths into this. Now, inside of Composer, everything, even these extra items that we've added, these are items that you can actually grab. You can select them all. And again, you can customize it. Everything is customizable. And what's really nice inside of Composer is if you want a very standardized method of documenting, you can save this as a style. I clicked out in space there. Let me go ahead and select those. Styles are just little files that contain specific information and settings. What that means is you can store it on a network. Everybody can access it, and I can snap to it whenever I want to make sure that those files are going to be saved and that I have those effects added. We can also go ahead and add in different types of content. There's different types of arrows that we can add as well. Something to keep in mind here is we are working with graphical data, but notice how I can still snap to cylindrical items. There is enough intelligence built in to really allow us to easily customize some of these items. And again, styles. If you use the same type of arrow style all the time, no reason to sit there and try to make it the same. You can just click on what those settings are going to be. We have different types of arrows. We can even add things such as circular, knowing that this is going to potentially spin. Again, if we do have this in a style, we can go ahead and utilize that as well. And it looks like it was actually behind that. I'll create a second one there. You can always hide anything, but I'm going to go ahead and create another one and move it over so that we can actually see it. And from here, we'll go ahead, change that. You can transform, translate, move items around, even if they are something that you have added into the project. We can make these larger. Again, customizing any of these nodes. This is something that we can easily set up. Once created, again, we'll save that view. Inside of Composer, if we want to do a type of parts list, we can certainly do that. So for example, perhaps we are planning on putting this in a document or on a website, and we would want to have a specific maybe parts list just for these items. I can actually go into workshops where we can choose how to publish specific data. And in here is where you can assign BOM IDs, you can hide or show the bill of materials table. And these can be unique to any specific view, or you can actually choose to bring in metadata such as SolidWorks custom properties into this as well. And we can show or hide some of our callouts. Again, these get sorted, but we can move these around as needed. Once done, just make sure you save that view. Just a couple more items that we're going to add in here. One is a detail view. What is really nice about Composer, again, is all of the different types of selections. So we can easily hide, show different items. One easy way to hide everything is to actually just turn it completely off inside of the design tree and then turn on the specific items that you want to see. We can actually create high quality detailed views of these components. Before I do that, I'm going to change the rendering style of this. This is so that my detail view is going to have very crisp edges. If I click on my detail view, this is going to allow me to specify what this view is going to look like. I can set this up as needed, and maybe I want to choose the color regions in this as well, and I'm just going to say create. Going through the technical illustration workshop like we just did creates items that are vector graphics, which means they scale really, really nice. Even if you have a 4K and 8K monitor, doesn't necessarily matter. It's going to be very high quality. And then we can just simply show all the geometry. So we can easily create this information, again, to call out. And then for our final view, this is where we're going to have that operating caution. So perhaps you have a specific library of photos that your company already uses for stuff like this. You can actually just pull that into Composer and just drag and drop it in. So you can even leverage existing information that you have. We can add static text into here as well. Again, this is like a glorified text box. It's really kind of all it is. We can, again, go through and specify how this is going to look and maybe even increase the size of the font. And then we'll save this. So again, quick overview of adding some of these specific effects into these images. So we can easily customize the content. You can save things in styles. You can use it over and over. And the idea here is to enhance image quality. So you essentially have a lot less verbiage that you have to write down or have something to supplement that verbiage. So all that work that we just did, we did that so that we can now output the content back to this Word document. So this is where Composer, I think, starts really kind of showing some of the automation in here. If I go under my workshops, I can export this as a high resolution image. Inside of Composer, there's an option to save multiple views. Basically, Composer is going to take all those views that we just created and just output them at one time. So you don't have to sit there and go file, save as, file, save as, file, save as, or copy, paste, copy, paste. So let's go ahead and save those. These are where my placeholder pictures are, and I'm just going to rename what those are called, and I'm going to click Save. So it actually just got done with those items. So let's go in here. I do have these items linked. So all I would have to do at this point is update my links, and almost those pictures are there. This is going to maintain all your formatting in Word and Adobe Illustrator, whatever you're using. Almost every type of word processing document has this type of functionality, but everything is there. And if we wanted to change the size, we could do so. This is one significant way to output content for this type of documentation. There's another way that Composer can actually output document, and we've seen a preview of this in the technical illustration. But another item that we can do is, instead of saving this as a detailed view to be inside of this project, I can just do a save as. And this is actually going to save as a specific vector graphics. And if I go into my directory, this is just going to open inside of a web browser. And this is going to give me my color coding. This is built into Composer. There's nothing extra you have to do to get this color coding. I didn't set anything up. There is nothing involved in this. It's just built-in functionality. So you can already see that this is your very first step in getting information from a CAD file directly onto a web page. I'll have an example at the end of one more extensive that's on our website. But again, it's really just that easy, and you can share these files inside your company. They're extremely small, just open up in a web browser. Those are kind of the two main items I'm going to cover. There are additional ways to publish items directly to PDFs or PowerPoint, but those two are going to relate directly to the documents that we're working on. But we saw that bulk image output and how we can save those SVGs for the website. So the next thing would be is like, well, that's nice, but my engineer just came back and had all these changes, and now what do I do? Do I have to start this whole thing over? No. And again, this is where I think Composer does actually a pretty fantastic job. Composer actually has its own ability to update information. So in here, you can actually choose a specific set of files. Again, if you are using SolidWorks, you can bring in native SolidWorks parts and assemblies. I'm going to bring in an existing SMG file. Again, this would have some of that information already in there that's been updated. You just want to make sure that your import settings are going to be the same as when you imported the file to begin with. That's going to help streamline this. But what Composer is going to do is, in the background, it's actually comparing something called net GUIDs. That's something that every single CAD file has. It's a unique identifier for your CAD file. And so it basically went through and was like, these files changed, they swapped them out, they updated it, they pulled that information and left everything else alone. So here, if I go ahead and I am on the original, you can actually see it added some additional geometry at the top. You have like these vents, they have like a logo and the button switch there. But what's great about this is every single view has already been updated. I don't have to go through, I don't have to redo any of this. Everything is already there. And so from here, what we would want to do is just re-output those images, which we now know is not that big of a deal, knowing we can output them all at the same time. I'm just going to override those pictures that are there. Again, let the system go through and output those items, and then back into my document, we can go ahead and update these. Again, already updated, everything's there. Only the pictures as applicable, even here you can see on the side, it's already been updated. So the update is actually going to be pretty robust inside a Composer. Of course, like anything, there's a couple of like snafus. If something has been deleted, it'll be removed. If something is added, you may have to like add it to a bill of materials. But comparing what you just saw, even with some additional effort into having to do a bunch of screenshots, and I know I do it, I crop stuff in Paint. Microsoft Paint is still like one of the most widely used applications in Windows. But this will actually really speed that process up. So design changes can occur very, very quickly. And the idea here is that you don't have to start things over all the time, and you don't have to rework everything every time there's been a little tiny change in the model. So with that, I'm going to talk a little bit about animations. We're not going to do a full animation, but I'm going to show you an easy way to start animations inside a Composer. And then I'm going to show you one that my team and I have worked on kind of over the course of time. So inside of Composer, and I think my tab, oh, there it is. My tab is somewhat hidden there. I'm gonna go and turn on my timeline. This actually puts Composer into like this animation mode. And you can just start dragging your views in. So this is why I said once you have your views are going to be like your fundamental building blocks. And then from here, we can start dragging these in. Now, if I take a look, notice that like my lines aren't showing. A lot of this I have set to not necessarily be visible depending on what I'm doing. But here, everything is under this collaboration tab. All of my arrows, all that information, if I wanted to have some of my pictures, such as that vector image show up, and then maybe my 2D text and my 2D image there. Usually what I then do is once I've added some information in, this is kind of a little tip for you, is just redo the original. And actually my bar should have been over there. This kind of resets those at the beginning. And I have a basic animation with all the motion. A lot of my content is already in there. Again, we'd have to go through and kind of take care of some of the timing as far as when things show, but it's as easy as that just to get started. And one of the reasons why it is easy is we're working with graphical content. So the concept of mates doesn't exist. When you start working in animations in SolidWorks, phenomenal if you are doing motion analysis with SolidWorks where you need your forces, your stresses, and all of that. You just need pretty pictures. You don't need to worry about the mates. Makes it a lot easier. As I said, I'm going to open up just a completed file that we have just to kind of show you the potential and kind of the finished product of what we can do. Again, this is something, I'm not going to show you the whole thing, but I'll kind of walk you through what this is doing. So you can actually see that it's highlighting items and putting them together. Then it's going to go on to the next item. It's going to assemble it, highlight it, and it actually goes through this entire assembly and puts the whole thing together. You can highlight it. Again, this has been kind of an ongoing thing for quite a while. And to be honest, the setup of something like this is actually a little bit more involved because you have to set up a CAD file to do something like this on a table and then move it. But this does show you some great capabilities as far as what the animations can do. Inside of animations, you can also add interactive content. What I mean by that is you can add buttons where it pauses. And so the end user can see what's going on and it requires the end user to then hit to go to the next frame. We actually do work with companies who use that for internal training on their assembly lines on how to put things together, how to repair things, and how to take them apart. Going back to that interactive content, remember we talked about that SVG file. This is actually just a little short blog. I worked on this with one of our, he's still an AE, but he's kind of a marketing AE. So he's a SolidWorks user, but he works on our marketing team. And I was like, hey, if you can figure out the HTML code for this, that would be amazing. And he was like, give me 5 minutes. It actually took him like a day. But the idea here is that you can click on items and dig down into them and get all your highlighting and see exactly what is inside of that assembly. So you can do this on any item. Again, this is posted on our website. You still get that dynamic highlighting. So this is something that you can do. This is actually through a series of SVG files. This is not just one. This is through a series of SVG files that are linked together. Again, going kind of way beyond what we have time for. But again, it's showing you possibilities. So, and then if you want the actual HTML code, that is actually free on our website. You can look that up. That's not a secret. So you can actually look that up if that's something that you're interested in. It's something we've gotten lots of questions on over the years, and we've gone back to SolidWorks, Dassault Systems, and they're like, yeah, you can do it. And we're like, well, how? They're like, yeah, you can do it. We're like, okay, well, thanks. Thanks for that. So we figured out how to do it. And so that's been pretty great there. All right. So with animations, again, we saw a great way just to start creating animations by dragging those views in. And again, you can save those out into multiple formats. SolidWorks Composer used to only output to an AVI file. I don't know about you, but the only thing that I know of that runs an AVI file is like Windows Media Player. I mean, yeah, everyone's like, yeah, it actually outputs to full HD, 4K. You can output very, very high quality videos now. So that was super exciting. And when we're like, thank you, finally, that you finally, did that. You're like a decade late, but it was there. It wasn't quite that late, but it felt like it as an end user. So that's what I had prepared for you guys as regarding Composer. I know it was kind of like a deep dive into it for the little time frame that we had, but it's such an underrated product, I think. I think it has so much potential in what you can use it for. And it's, again, in one of the sections of technical documentation where people are like, you already make me do drawings. Don't make me write any more documents. But we write documents all the time. So we can actually leverage CAD files to help us out.